The new Stranger Things season has been absolutely bulldozed online, but is it really as bad as people say it is? I, like many people, was looking forward to the latest season of Stranger Things, as while it never really was my favorite show, it was something always to look forward to. Even with the low of season 3, I felt like the show still had enough thought behind it that made it still worth watching. However, I was a bit concerned going into my viewing of the 5th season, as I had heard for weeks about just how much of a mess the series has gotten to be. And I feel like for most of the people, it really came down to 3 separate things: the technical aspects, then the writing and pacing, and finally the watering down of the main characters. And in this video, I wanted to truly break down what people are saying and whether or not it fully ruins the show as many people are trying to say, or is it just something people are making a big deal out of. But before getting into this, spoilers will be ahead, so if you haven't watched it for yourself, be warned. First off, let's look at the technical aspects of the show that people have pointed out, as it seems like the show had a quite noticeable drop in quality between seasons. For example, the lighting, while fully illuminating the subjects so we can see the detail we need to, just overall feels so much flatter than the previous seasons. For example, take the second portal run where Max tries to escape Henry's grasp once again. It noticeably looks much worse, and while the effects themselves are mostly the same, the lighting creates such a huge disconnect that it looks like a green screen. This is something that is consistently worse in season 5, and it's most noticeable when you compare it to the previous seasons from this one. It's something that a lot of modern Hollywood projects suffer from, and it looks like Stranger Things will not be any different. Then there's the cinematography, which isn't helped at all by the consistent lighting issues. One thing that we know about Netflix is that they have been pushing memos out to shows that they need to be easier to watch for people not fully paying attention. This is what I think hurts season 5 the most, as so much of the shot design in this feels so flat. And I think this hurts the show by far the most out of all the technical aspects, as before this is one of the best looking shows on the entire platform. The cinematography before, while still using a lot of modern techniques, still attempting to get that 80s horror feel with it. And while the season still has plenty of homages to 80s horror, it feels a bit more superficial than the past few seasons had. Thus, while watching, the show feels much more like a Netflix show. And if you've seen enough Netflix shows, you know exactly what I am talking about. And with its heavier focus on center framing, with nearly every shot in season 5 being that way, it made a lot of the season visually uninteresting in comparison to past seasons. This is not what I call bad cinematography per se, it's just not as interesting as it used to be. The show is definitely not boring to look at, but the show went from being one of the best looking TV shows to above average. However, I feel like a lot of people are saying the cinematography was bad in season 5, and I really can't say that either. It's still great. For example, I think the finale was great looking for a television show. And although some of the effects were a bit cheesy, I haven't seen as many shows that have really even dared to do as much as this finale did. However, I do think some people need to realize that for television, the effects are a bit different, as while movies usually take about 1 to 2 years to complete, that's only for about 2 hours worth of footage. However, with this latest season, while they had around 3 to 4 years of work, it was for over 10 hours of footage. Because of that, they have a lot less time to work on each effect, so of course it's not going to look as good as it does in a movie. And that gets into my feelings on the effects, as I hear about how they look pretty constantly, and while I would partially agree, it's not really the fault of the VFX team. I feel like a lot of the issues with the effects comes down to the lighting. One thing I am constantly seeing is people comparing how the Demogorgon looked in season 1 compared to now, and while I do agree it looked better within the scene, think about the lighting. Every time the Demogorgon appears in season 1, it has flashing lights. This was done very deliberately, as with the flashing lights they were able to hide a lot of the flaws that the original effect had. But with this extreme lighting that leaves no detail up to the imagination, it makes all the effects look noticeably worse. It's a common idea that if you're going to use effects, you should try to make the scene a bit darker in order to hide the flaws. But because of this new lighting technique that has really taken over Hollywood, all the flaws are there for everyone to see. This is one of the other reasons that lighting is the main issue here. However, with this section of criticism, I have to ask myself if these technical flaws hurt the show to the point of being unviewable like some are making it out to be. Well, to answer that, I really think it's up to you personally. I know for me, I am used to watching stuff that have a ton of technical errors, so they didn't fully drag me out here while I was watching. But for someone who may only want to watch something that they can fully get immersed into, then the season may not be for them. It's a noticeable step down from the past few seasons, and if you really don't really look past that stuff, it's really going to grind at you while watching, so I can see why there's such a polarized reaction to that. But now let's get into what I hear about the most. By far, what people mention the most about Stranger Things 5 is the writing, and this is something that I can fully understand to a point. The writing had by far the biggest drop-offs between seasons, but it honestly makes sense as the season was made in the middle of the writer's strike. But I also think this is where Netflix's decisions definitely hurt the show by far the most. For example, in this season, the characters say every single aspect that we need to know. The thing I hear the most about this is about how constantly someone within the episode will pull out some sort of map and explain everything involving that location. It does this constantly to the point where it could happen 2, maybe 3 times per episode. I think this mostly stems from Netflix prioritizing viewers who aren't fully watching, as it constantly reminds you about all the information in case you didn't fully get it. But in the process of doing this, it sucked out all the realism and character development that made the first 4 seasons so interesting. And I won't try to pretend this is my point, as I read somewhere else, and I can't fully remember where, but someone pointed out that the writing took such a nosedive, as in season 1 we got more excited about lights turning on than a cosmic interdimensional wormhole. And while I want to blame all of this on the bad decisions that Netflix made, it also seems like the story didn't know exactly what to do with themselves at that point. By far, one of the most jarring aspects was how they seemed to brush over the fact that the town has a bunch of openings to the upside down and the military has done a complete takeover. As well, this would make sense if it had been set exactly after season 4 due to the immediacy of the threat. Instead, it's months after. This makes me think that the brothers had written themselves into a bit of a corner, as they kept trying to up the mayhem but really didn't know how to. We get introduced to a new military threat played by Linda Hamilton, but she really doesn't do much in this season. She's just a foil for Hopper and Eleven, but that's really all she does. That goes for a lot of the characters that they focus on this season, except for Derek and Holly, who I think both did excellent jobs in their roles. But every other new addition just made the cast feel a bit bloated, and that they really couldn't focus their time on what made the show so special in the first place. And the endings we get for our core 4, while being a nice conclusion for them all, didn't feel fully there. Honestly, it might have been a better option to make the epilogue and final episodes 2 separate episodes, as it felt just a bit too simple. It's rare to say I wanted to see more about the characters, but here the characters in those first 4 seasons were just so interesting that their simple endings just feel so unsatisfying. There's also one other scene involving the writing that people are harping on, and while I think it does have flaws, most people are jumping on it for political reasons that I don't agree with, so I don't really feel like talking about that. Now, to end this section, is the writing so bad that it completely ruins the season? No, but it has taken a noticeable dive from the seasons before it. I think the writing here suffers a bit from the same issues that season 3 had, where it was just trying to fit too much within one season. The best moments of the past few seasons were the character moments that made those grand fight scenes so spectacular to watch, which is something that this season is nearly completely missing. However, does it make the season completely unwatchable like some are making it out to be? Well, no, of course not. It still has a pretty competent team behind it, and those first few seasons did just so much work that just watching the characters do their thing is at least entertaining, but it does give a good segue into my last section. This has been something that has been a bit of an issue since season 3, but one of the main criticisms I hear consistently about this season is just how unimportant a lot of the characters feel in these latest seasons. A lot of it became so plot focused, as there seems to be just so much going on, the characters usually feel like a bit more of an afterthought in most scenes. But when it comes to the watering down of the lead characters, I think this issue comes down to just how much they wanted to fit into one season. This season felt like it had no time to wait on anything and had a breakneck speed throughout. But a lot of that impact was lost, as the characters seemed to be mildly forgotten about even in their last moments together. It also doesn't help that the dialogue is then just exposition dumping for the majority of the runtime, so those little character moments we do have are just a bit messier. And for an average show, a lot of these wouldn't be major issues, but the fact that it had done such a good job with world building before is what makes it stick out like a sore thumb. And that is what I think hurts Stranger Things Season 5 the most, as while I still enjoyed it, it was definitely a major step down from the seasons before it. And while I do not think that the season deserves the ones it's getting, I can understand why so many fans would be upset with how the series went. But do I think it's as bad as a lot of fans are making it out to be? Well, overall, no. Although I think this season is a bit of a step down from 3 and about 2 from everything else, it still was an enjoyable watch. Am I rushing to rewatch it either? I can't really say I am. Overall though, I would say this season was a solid 7 out of 10. It was solid, but could have been much better. And that is all for this week, and make sure if you haven't already to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all soon.